Single dad fixed a stranger's car in the rain next morning. 5 black SUVs surrounded his house. And that's when the poor mechanic realized the woman he helped wasn't just a stranded driver, but someone whose secrets were dangerous enough to get him and his kid caught in the middle of a storm he never saw coming. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The evening rain drummed steadily against the metal roof of Ethan Ward's auto shop. He wiped his greasy hands on a worn red rag and stepped back to admire his work on Mrs. Henderson's ancient Chevrolet. The engine would run smoothly now, though he'd charged her less than he should have. He knew she was on a fixed income. Ethan's shoulders ached as he pulled down the heavy garage door. The day's work had been long, and the stack of unpaid bills on his office desk seemed to mock him. But he couldn't bring himself to raise his prices, not when so many of his customers were struggling just like him. The clock on the wall showed 7:30 p.m. Lily would be waiting at home, probably worried about him working late again. His daughter had grown too serious for her 15 years, shouldering adult concerns since her mother's passing 3 years ago. The rain intensified as Ethan climbed into his old pickup truck. The windshield wipers squeaked across the glass, fighting a losing battle against the downpour. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness as he navigated the winding rural highway that led home. His mind wandered to the mortgage payment due next week. The bank had already sent 2 warning letters. He'd have to dip into Lily's college fund again, something that twisted his gut with guilt every time. But keeping a roof over their heads had to come first. Through the rain-streaked windshield, Ethan caught sight of hazard lights blinking about a quarter mile ahead. The yellow flashers reflected off the wet asphalt, a distress signal in the promise gathering dark. He could have driven past. He was tired, soaked, and Lily was waiting. But that wasn't who he was. Ethan pulled his truck onto the shoulder, gravel crunching under the tires. He grabbed his flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out into the rain. Water immediately began seeping through his worn work jacket. The stranded vehicle was a sleek black Mercedes sedan that looked completely out of place on this rural Tennessee road. A woman stood beside it, holding her phone up, searching for a signal. Even in the dim light, Ethan could see she was dressed for success. Elegant suit, heels, perfectly styled hair, now wilting in the rain. "Having trouble?" he called out, keeping his distance so as not to startle her. She turned quickly, tension visible in her shoulders until she got a good look at him. Something in Ethan's gentle demeanor seemed to put her at ease. "Yes," she said, lowering her phone. "The engine just died while I was driving. I can't get any cell service out here." "I'm Ethan Ward," he said, moving closer. "I own the auto shop about 5 miles back. Mind if I take a look?" Relief washed over her face. "I'm Grace Morrow, and please, I'd really appreciate that." Ethan clicked on his flashlight and propped open the hood. Rain pattered against his back as he leaned in to examine the engine. Despite his exhaustion, his hands moved with practiced expertise, checking connections and testing components. "You're not from around here," he commented, keeping his tone conversational as he worked. "No," Grace replied, stepping closer to watch. "I'm heading back to Nashville from a business meeting in Knoxville. I should have checked the weather forecast more carefully." Ethan nodded, his attention caught by something in the engine. "Ah, here's your problem. Loose connection in your alternator wiring. That's why the engine died." His fingers, despite being cold and wet, worked quickly to repair the connection. Grace huddled under her umbrella, watching him work in the rain. "Mr. Ward, you really don't have to stay out in this weather. I can call for a tow truck." Ethan glanced up, offering a small smile. "Nearly done now. No sense in you waiting out here for hours." He made a final adjustment, then straightened up. "Try starting it?" Grace slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine purred to life immediately. Her face lit up with relief and gratitude. She grabbed her purse and stepped back out into the rain. "Please, let me pay you for your time. You're soaked to the bone." Ethan held up his hands, gently refusing. "No need for that. Just glad I could help." He closed the hood with a solid thunk. "You should be fine now, but if you have any trouble, my shop's just down the road. Ward's Auto Repair." "But surely," Grace began to protest. "Really, it's fine." Ethan insisted quietly. "Just drive careful in this rain, Miss Morrow." Something in his tone made her stop arguing. She studied his face for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Ward. Your kindness means a lot." Ethan stepped back as Grace got into her car. The Mercedes' engine hummed smoothly as she pulled away, red taillights disappearing into the rainy darkness. He stood there for a moment, rain running down his neck, watching until her car was out of sight. Then he climbed back into his truck, clothes dripping on the worn seat. His cell phone showed 2 missed texts from Lily, asking where he was. As he pulled back onto the highway, Ethan smiled slightly, thinking of the hot chocolate she would probably have waiting for him. The warmth of helping someone, even a stranger, had somehow made his own burdens feel a little lighter. With a gentle press on the accelerator, Ethan guided his truck through the rain toward home, unaware that this simple act of kindness would soon ripple out to change both his life and his daughter's in ways he could never have imagined. The windshield wipers squeaked across Ethan's truck window as he pulled into the gravel driveway of their small ranch house. The porch light cast a warm glow through the rain, and he could see the kitchen windows glowing yellow against the dark night. His muscles ached from a long day of repairs, but the sight of home lifted his spirits. Inside, Lily sat at their scratched kitchen table, textbooks and papers spread out around her. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she looked up with relief when he walked in. "Dad, I was getting worried." She jumped up from her chair, nearly knocking over a glass of water. "You're soaked." "Just a little rain," Ethan said, hanging his wet jacket on the hook by the door. Water dripped onto the worn linoleum floor. "Sorry I'm late, sweetheart. Lost track of time at the shop." "It's after 10, Lily said, her forehead creasing with concern. "Have you eaten anything?" Ethan smiled at his daughter's mothering. At 15, she sometimes seemed more like the parent than he did. "I'll fix us something now. How's the homework coming?" "Almost done with my history paper." Lily settled back at the table while Ethan moved around their small kitchen, pulling out a loaf of bread and some cheese from the fridge. "But Mr. Patterson assigned this huge science project today. We have to build a working model of a renewable energy system." "That sounds interesting," Ethan said, butter sizzling in the pan as he started making grilled cheese sandwiches. "What kind are you thinking of doing? Maybe solar panels? Though the materials might be expensive." She trailed off, watching him carefully. Ethan kept his expression neutral, though his stomach tightened. "We'll figure something out. Maybe we can find some recycled materials to use." The kitchen filled with the warm smell of melting cheese. Lily gathered her homework into a neat pile, making space for their plates. "How was work? Did you fix Mrs. Henderson's car?" "Got it running smooth now." Ethan flipped the sandwiches, the bread golden brown. "Had an interesting stop on the way home, too. Lady broke down on Highway 41 inches the rain." "Dad, you're already working such long hours at the shop." Lily's voice held that mix of pride and exasperation he'd grown used to. "Couldn't just drive past," he said, sliding the sandwiches onto plates and adding some pickle spears from the jar. "Engine trouble. Pretty simple fix, actually." "Did she at least pay you?" Lily asked as he set the plates on the table. Ethan sat down, avoiding her knowing look. Didn't feel right, charging someone already having a rough night. "Dad." Lily sighed, but there was affection in it. She took a bite of her sandwich. "You're too nice sometimes." "No such thing as too nice," he said, though his mind flickered to the stack of bills in his desk drawer. "Tell me more about this science project. When's it due?" They ate their late dinner, Lily explaining her ideas while Ethan listened, offering suggestions. The rain continued outside, making their small kitchen feel cozy despite its dated cabinets and chipped countertops. Lily's voice grew animated as she talked about school, but Ethan noticed how she kept steering clear of anything that might cost money. "Dad?" she said finally, pushing her empty plate away. "I know things are tight right now. Maybe I could get a part-time job, just on weekends?" "Absolutely not." Ethan's voice was gentle but firm. "Your job is school. Things will pick up at the shop soon." He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Don't worry about the money, sweetheart. That's my department." "But I see you worried all the time," she said quietly, "even when you try to hide it." Ethan's heart squeezed. Sometimes he forgot how observant she was, how much she picked up on despite his efforts to shield her. "Every family goes through rough patches," he said. "We're doing just fine, and you're growing up so fast. I want you to enjoy being a teenager while you can." Lily nodded, but her eyes were still concerned. She stood and started gathering the dishes. "I'll clean up. You look tired." "Leave those for morning," Ethan said, standing too. "It's way past bedtime for both of us." He walked Lily to her room, pausing in the doorway as she climbed into bed. Her walls were covered with photos of friends and school artwork, making the small space uniquely hers. Sleep well, sweetheart, he said. Love you. Love you too, Dad. She snuggled under her quilt, the one her mother had made years ago. Don't stay up too late with the bills. Ethan's smile faltered slightly. Good night, Lily. Once her door was closed, he went to his desk in the living room. The old couch creaked as he sat down, spreading out the overdue notices and bank statements. The numbers refused to add up differently, no matter how many times he moved them around. Property tax coming due, insurance payment, utilities, the shop's rent. Each bill felt heavier than the last. He rubbed his tired eyes, the day's strain settling deep in his bones. The clock on the wall showed nearly midnight. With a sigh, he gathered the papers and returned them to his desk drawer. Tomorrow was another day. He'd figure something out. He always did. In his bedroom, Ethan changed into old sweatpants and a t-shirt. The bed felt impossibly inviting after such a long day. As he drifted off to sleep, his last thoughts were of Lily's science project and wondering if any of his customers might have old solar panels lying around. Morning sunlight filtered through the worn curtains of the Ward's kitchen as Ethan measured coffee grounds into the old drip machine. The familiar aroma helped chase away his lingering exhaustion from the previous night. His weathered hands moved automatically through the routine while his mind wandered to the stack of bills waiting in his office drawer. Through the thin walls, he could hear Lily getting ready for school, drawers opening and closing, the bathroom faucet running, her footsteps moving between rooms. The coffee maker gurgled to life, and Ethan reached for 2 mismatched mugs from the cabinet. Dad? Lily called from upstairs. Have you seen my blue notebook? Check under your history textbook, he replied, knowing his daughter's usual spots. The one you left on your bed last night. Found it. The sound of engines, multiple engines, broke through the morning quiet. Deep, powerful rumbling that seemed to shake the windows. Ethan frowned, moving to peer out the kitchen window. His coffee cup froze halfway to his mouth. Dad? Lily appeared in the doorway, her backpack slung over one shoulder. She wore her favorite jeans and a faded t-shirt that had once been her mother's. What's that noise? Before Ethan could answer, dark shapes pulled into view. 5 identical black SUVs, gleaming in the morning sun, rolled to a stop in front of their house and along the narrow street. Their small home was completely surrounded. Stay inside, Ethan said, firmly, setting down his coffee. His heart hammered against his ribs, but he kept his voice steady for Lily's sake. Through the window, he could see Mrs. Peterson from next door standing on her front porch in her bathrobe, mouth agape. The Collins family across the street had gathered at their living room window. In their quiet neighborhood, where everyone knew everyone else's business, this kind of scene was unprecedented. Dad? Lily's voice quavered. She gripped the doorframe, her face pale. What's happening? Ethan moved to the front door, positioning himself between Lily and whatever waited outside. His mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. They paid their taxes, kept to themselves, had no enemies he could think of, but 5 black SUVs didn't show up at your door for nothing. The driver's doors opened in perfect synchronization. Men in dark suits stepped out, their movements precise and coordinated. They wore earpieces and sunglasses, scanning the area with professional efficiency. Ethan's stomach clenched. He pulled open the front door, stepping onto the worn wooden porch. Can I help you, gentlemen? His voice came out stronger than he felt. The rear door of the center SUV opened. Instead of another suit-clad man, a woman emerged. She wore an elegant gray business suit and carried herself with unmistakable authority. It took Ethan a moment to recognize her from the previous night's storm, Grace Morrow, the stranded driver he'd helped. She looked different in the morning light. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She moved with the confidence of someone used to commanding attention. But when she saw Ethan's tense posture and Lily's frightened face behind him, her expression softened with genuine concern. Mr. Ward, she said, walking toward the porch. Her heels clicked against the concrete of their cracked walkway. I'm so sorry for startling you and your daughter. I realize this must seem overwhelming. Ethan remained rigid in the doorway. Ma'am, with all due respect, what's this about? I came to thank you properly for your help last night, Grace explained, stopping at the foot of the porch steps. She gestured to the men in suits. This is my security detail. I should have called first, but I wanted to speak with you as soon as possible. Behind him, Ethan felt Lily relax slightly. His own tension began to ease, though confusion took its place. Security detail? Who was this woman? You didn't have to do this, Ethan said, running a hand through his graying hair. Really, it was nothing special. Grace's expression turned serious. On the contrary, Mr. Ward, what you did was very special indeed. She glanced at the neighbors who were still watching with undisguised curiosity. Would it be possible for us to speak privately? Ethan hesitated. The morning coffee still sat cooling in the kitchen. Lily needed to get to school. His shop was supposed to open in less than an hour. But something in Grace's manner, a mixture of urgency and sincerity, made him pause. He looked back at Lily, who nodded slightly. Despite her initial fear, she seemed curious now. "All right," he said finally, stepping aside to hold the door open. "Please, come in." Inside Ethan's modest living room, sunlight struggled through dust-flecked windows, highlighting the worn furniture and faded family photos on the walls. Grace Morrow sat perfectly poised on the edge of the weathered couch, her tailored business suit a stark contrast to the humble surroundings. Ethan perched awkwardly in his favorite armchair, still trying to make sense of the morning's surreal turn of events. "Mr. Ward," Grace began, her voice warm but professional, "I realize this morning's arrival may have been overwhelming. Let me properly introduce myself. I'm Grace Morrow, CEO of Morrowtech Corporation." Ethan's eyes widened. Everyone knew Morrowtech, the technology giant whose charitable programs regularly made headlines. He shifted in his seat, suddenly aware of the coffee stain on his work shirt. "The woman from last night?" he said slowly. "That was you?" Grace's composed expression softened. "Yes. I was returning from a business meeting when my car broke down. You didn't just help me, Mr. Ward. You showed exceptional character. Most people would have driven past in that storm, but you stopped. You refused payment. You didn't even tell me your name." Ethan shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Anyone would have done the same, but they didn't. You did." Grace reached for her leather briefcase. "Which is exactly why I'm here. Morrowtech has a regional fleet of over 50 vehicles that require regular maintenance and repairs. We've been looking for a reliable local service provider, and after last night, I believe I've found the right person for the job." She pulled out a folder and placed it on the coffee table between them. "This is a preliminary contract we're prepared to offer you. Exclusive rights to service all Morrowtech vehicles in the region, with guaranteed monthly minimum payments regardless of the actual repair volume." Ethan stared at the folder as if it might disappear. His throat felt dry. "Ma'am, I think there's been a mistake. My shop is just a small operation. I'm not set up for fleet servicing. Please, call me Grace," she said. "And there's no mistake. We've done our research. Your technical certifications are impressive, and your reputation for honest work is exactly what we're looking for. The contract includes provisions for expanding your facilities and hiring additional staff as needed." Before Ethan could respond, the front door burst open. Lily rushed in, her backpack still on her shoulders, face flushed with concern. She stopped short at the sight of Grace. "Dad?" Lily's voice wavered. "Everyone at school was talking about black SUVs at our house. I got worried." Ethan stood quickly. "It's okay, sweetheart. This is Miss Morrow. She's here about a business opportunity for the shop." Grace rose as well, and something flickered across her face as she looked at Lily, a mixture of surprise and something deeper, more emotional. "Hello, Lily. I'm so sorry if our presence caused you any worry. Your father helped me during the storm last night, and I came to thank him." Lily studied Grace carefully, then glanced at the folder on the table. "Are you really going to help save Dad's shop?" The directness of the question hung in the air. Grace's professional demeanor softened further, and she moved closer to Lily. "Your father is a good man who deserves a fair chance. And yes, that's exactly what I'm trying to do." "But why?" Lily pressed. "Just because he helped you once?" "Lily?" Ethan warned gently, but Grace held up a hand. "It's a fair question," she said, meeting Lily's gaze. "Sometimes one moment can tell you everything you need to know about a person's character. Your father showed integrity and kindness when he thought no one was watching. Those are exactly the qualities Morrowtech values in its partners." Something passed between Grace and Lily, then a shared understanding that Ethan couldn't quite grasp. Lily's defensive posture relaxed, and she offered a small smile. Grace turned back to Ethan. "The contract is just a starting point. Take time to review it with your lawyer. I'll return tomorrow morning with the final paperwork, and we can discuss any questions or concerns you may have." She gathered her belongings, her movements precise and efficient, but her eyes lingered on Lily. "It was lovely to meet you, Lily. I hope we'll see more of each other." Ethan walked Grace to the door, still feeling like he was in a dream. "Miss "Morrow, Grace, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," she replied. "Just think about it. This could be good for both of us." She paused at the threshold. "And Mr. Ward, thank you again for last night. Not many people would have stopped." After Grace left, Ethan and Lily sat side by side on the couch, staring at the folder on the coffee table. The house felt strangely quiet after the morning's commotion. Through the window, they could see the black SUVs pulling away one by one. "Dad?" Lily's voice was barely above a whisper. "Is this real?" Ethan put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "I'm not sure, sweetheart. I'm not sure at all." They sat there together, father and daughter, trying to process how a simple act of kindness in a rainstorm might have just changed everything. Morning sunlight glinted off the rusty sign of Ward's Auto Repair as Grace's black SUV pulled into the gravel lot, its tires crunching softly over the scattered stones and patches of dried mud. The usual fleet of security vehicles was noticeably absent today, making her arrival feel more personal than official, almost intimate in its simplicity. Ethan stood in the open bay door of his weathered shop, methodically wiping his hands on a red shop rag that had seen countless oil changes and brake repairs. His weathered face, marked by years of honest work and recent grief, showed a complex mix of anticipation and uncertainty as he watched her approach. The morning air carried the familiar scents of motor oil, rust, and the faint sweetness of honeysuckle growing wild along the chain-link fence that bordered his property. A mockingbird perched on the telephone wire above, cycling through its repertoire of borrowed songs. Grace emerged from the SUV, clutching a leather portfolio against her chest like armor. Her corporate exterior was still carefully maintained, crisp navy blazer that probably cost more than Ethan made in a month, hair styled in a perfect chignon, makeup applied with professional precision, but something in her bearing seemed noticeably softer than yesterday. The rigid posture had relaxed slightly, and her usual commanding presence felt more approachable, more human. A single security officer remained by the vehicle, his stance casual as he gave them the space this conversation clearly required. "Good morning, Mr. Ward," Grace said, her heels clicking with measured precision on the gravel as she approached. Each step seemed deliberate, as if she were crossing more than just a parking lot. "Just Ethan is fine," he replied, gesturing toward his cramped office with a hand that still bore the calluses of decades spent under car hoods. "Would you like to come in? I made fresh coffee this morning. It's not fancy like what you're probably used to, but it's hot and strong." A genuine smile warmed Grace's features, transforming her face from corporate polish to something far more real. "That would be wonderful, thank you. I could use something normal today." The office was small but meticulously tidy, a reflection of Ethan's careful nature. Decades of dog-eared service manuals stood stacked neatly on metal shelves that had seen better days, their spines faded from years of fluorescent lighting. Photographs of classic cars decorated the wood-paneled walls, a '67 Mustang he'd restored for his honeymoon, a Chevy pickup that belonged to his father, memories of better times frozen in glossy frames. A worn wooden desk dominated the cramped space, its surface cleared except for an ancient mister coffee machine that had been brewing Morning Hope for at least 15 years, and two mismatched mugs, one advertising a long-closed diner, the other a faded Christmas gift from Lily. Grace settled into the creaky visitor's chair, its vinyl seat patched with electrical tape, while Ethan moved with practiced efficiency around the small space. "Black okay?" he asked, holding up the steaming pot. She nodded, accepting the chipped ceramic mug with hands that seemed too delicate for the rough surroundings. Her perfectly manicured nails a stark contrast to the workingman's environment. "Perfect." She took a tentative sip and was surprised to find it genuinely good, rich, and strong, without the bitter edge of office coffee. Setting the portfolio carefully on the desk, she withdrew a thick legal document bound in navy covers. "I know you're a busy man with responsibilities, so I'll get right to the point. This is the fleet service agreement we discussed yesterday." Ethan settled into his desk chair, the springs protesting under his weight as they had every morning for the past 8 years. His expression grew serious as he began reading, his weathered fingers turning pages with the careful attention he gave to every important task. The only sounds in the small office were the hypnotic whir of the ancient ceiling fan that had been rattling in the same rhythm since he'd bought the place, and the distant hum of highway traffic carrying the day's commuters toward lives and dreams he sometimes wondered about. Grace sipped her coffee slowly, watching him with an intensity that seemed to go far beyond simple business interest. Her dark eyes traced the lines of concentration that creased his forehead, the way his lips moved slightly as he absorbed the legal language, the unconscious way he rubbed his thumb against his wedding ring when he was thinking deeply. As he turned to the third page, she set down her mug with hands that trembled just slightly. The sound of ceramic against wood seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet space. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice carrying a weight that made him look up immediately. He met her gaze, noting the subtle but unmistakable change in her tone, the way it had shifted from professional courtesy to something far more personal and vulnerable. She paused, her usual corporate eloquence deserting her as she struggled with words that felt too big, too important to get wrong. For the first time since he'd met her, she seemed genuinely unsure of herself. "I knew Sarah, your wife." The pen in Ethan's hand froze mid-signature, the blue ink forming a small dot on the contract as his world tilted slightly, off its axis. He stared at Grace, watching his color drain slowly from his face like water from a broken vessel. The familiar ache in his chest, the one that lived there permanently, now suddenly sharpened into something more immediate. "It was brief, just a few weeks when I was going through a very difficult time in my life several years ago," Grace continued, her composed exterior beginning to crack like ice under spring sunshine, revealing the raw emotion that lived beneath her polished surface. "She was volunteering at a women's shelter in Nashville, and I was staying there." Ethan's throat worked silently for a long moment, his mouth opening and closing as he searched for words that seemed to have fled entirely. When his voice finally emerged, it was barely above a whisper. "Sarah never mentioned. She couldn't. The shelter's policy was strict confidentiality, no real names, no personal information shared. But your wife?" Grace's voice grew thick with emotion. As memory surfaced, "She had this way of making everyone feel safe, like they mattered. She helped me find the courage to leave a dangerous situation that could have killed me." Grace's perfectly manicured fingers traced the rim of her coffee mug as she gathered courage for what came next. "But there's more. Something I've wanted to tell you since I realized who you were last night, since I put the pieces together." She took a steadying breath that seemed to draw strength from some deep well within her. "Years ago, when I was at my absolute lowest point, a stranger helped me. It was raining one of those cold, miserable nights that soaks you to the bone. My car had broken down on a dark stretch of highway, and I was terrified my ex would find me before I could get away." Her eyes met Ethan's directly, holding his gaze with an intensity that made the air between them feel charged. "A kind man stopped and fixed my car in the rain. He refused payment, wouldn't even tell me his name. That single act of kindness gave me hope when I desperately needed it." Ethan's brow furrowed deeply as he processed her words, his mind working to organize fragments of memory and meaning into something coherent. He looked down at the contract spread before him, then back at Grace's expectant face, clearly struggling to piece together the edges of a puzzle he couldn't quite see the shape of yet. "I never forgot that man's kindness," Grace continued, her voice gaining strength as she spoke from her heart. "It inspired much of Marotech's charitable mission over the years. I've always wanted to thank him properly, to let him know what his simple act of decency meant to someone who had almost given up on the goodness of people. But I never knew his name, never had any way to find him." Before Ethan could find words to respond to this revelation, the sharp crunch of tires on gravel cut through the heavy moment like a blade. A black government-issue SUV swept into the lot with obvious urgency, its driver parking at an angle that suggested official business that couldn't wait. Two men in identical dark suits emerged from the vehicle, their expressions carrying the kind of gravity that made ordinary people's stomachs drop. They strode toward the office with the purposeful gait of federal agents on a mission. Grace stood quickly, her professional mask sliding back into place with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to crisis management. Ethan rose more slowly, confusion and concern evident in every line of his weathered face as he tried to process both Grace's revelation and this new development. The men reached the office door, their presence filling the small space with an aura of official authority that seemed to press against the walls. The taller one, his face stern beneath close-cropped gray hair, spoke first with the kind of voice that expected immediate attention. "Mr. Ward, Miss Morrow, we need to speak with both of you immediately." The two federal bureau investigators stood out starkly in Ethan's cramped office, their dark suits a stark contrast to the oil-stained walls and cluttered desk. Agent Roberts, a stern-faced woman with graying hair pulled into a tight bun, studied a file while her partner, Agent Chen, positioned himself near the door. "Mr. Ward," Agent Roberts began, her voice clipped and professional. "We need to discuss the events of last night regarding Miss Morrow's vehicle." She glanced at Grace, who had taken the only other chair in the office. The breakdown wasn't accidental. Ethan's hands gripped the edge of his desk. "What do you mean?" "Someone deliberately tampered with my car," Grace explained softly. The composed CEO from earlier seemed slightly shaken. "The fuel line was cut in a way that would cause the engine to fail gradually, leaving me stranded in a remote location." Agent Chen stepped forward. "Security footage from the restaurant where Miss Morrow dined shows two individuals accessing her vehicle approximately 40 minutes before she left. They were professionals in and out in less than 3 minutes. If you hadn't stopped to help," Grace added, meeting Ethan's eyes, "I would have been completely alone when they returned." The implications of her words hung heavy in the small office. Ethan's throat went dry. "They were coming back?" Agent Roberts nodded grimly. "We found fresh tire tracks at the scene this morning, made after the rain stopped. Whoever did this returned to find an empty car. We believe this is connected to an ongoing investigation into corporate espionage and corruption within certain departments of Morrowtech," Agent Chen explained. "Miss Morrow has been assisting our investigation for several months." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing to Lily. "What does this have to do with me?" "The people behind this now know you were involved," Grace said, leaning forward. "They'll assume you have information, whether you do or not. And after my visit here yesterday," she trailed off, guilt flickering across her face, "your daughter could also be at risk," Agent Roberts stated bluntly. "We've already stationed plainclothes officers near her school." Ethan's chest tightened. The thought of Lily in danger made his hand shake. "I need to get her. She's safe," Agent Chen assured him. "We have eyes on her. But we need to move you both to a secure location until we can contain this situation." Grace stood up, placing a gentle hand on Ethan's arm. "I'm so sorry to have brought this to your door, Ethan, but please, let us protect you and Lily. I have a private compound outside the city with top-level security. You'll be safe there." Ethan's mind whirled with protests. His shop, their home, Lily's school, but the image of his daughter's face stopped each one before it reached his lips. "How long?" "A few days, maybe a week," Agent Roberts replied. "We're close to identifying the key players. Once we have them in custody, the threat should be neutralized. I'll make sure you don't lose any business," Grace added quickly. "We can redirect your clients to trusted shops and compensate you for the downtime. Lily's teachers will be notified and can send her assignments electronically." Ethan looked around his small office at the family photo on his desk from happier times, at the wall calendar marked with payment due dates and customer appointments. Everything in him wanted to refuse, to believe they were overreacting, but he thought of the tire tracks in the mud, of strangers returning to an empty car in the rain, of what might have happened to Grace if he hadn't stopped. "I need to talk to Lily first," he said finally. "She has to understand what's happening." Grace nodded. "Of course. Agent Roberts can accompany you to the school while you pack some essentials from home. I'll have my staff prepare rooms at the compound. We should move quickly," Agent Chen added. "The less predictable our movements, the less predictable, better." Ethan stood up slowly, feeling the weight of the situation settle onto his shoulders. He moved through his office and the shop bay in a daze, gathering his tools and important papers. Each familiar object seemed suddenly precious, each routine task tinged with uncertainty. At the electrical panel, he paused. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, illuminating the space where he'd spent countless hours working to build a life for himself and Lily. His fingers hesitated over the switches. "We'll keep watch over the place," Agent Roberts said quietly behind him, seeming to understand his reluctance. Ethan nodded, unable to speak. With a decisive movement, he flipped the switches down one by one. Darkness crept across the shop floor as each bank of lights went dark. The last switch felt heavier than all the others. The shop fell into shadow, the only light now coming from the morning sun through the dusty windows. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was leaving more than just a building. He was leaving the careful routine he'd built, the simple life he'd managed to maintain for Lily's sake. In the dim light, he couldn't see when or if the path would lead back. "Ready?" Agent Roberts asked softly. Ethan took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and turned toward the door. He had to be ready. Lily needed him to be ready. Everything else, the shop, their home, their normal life, would have to wait. The door locked behind him with a heavy click that echoed in the empty shop. The black SUV wound its way up a secluded mountain road, thick forest, pressing in on both sides. Ethan sat in the back with Lily, their hastily packed bags between them. She hadn't said much since they left home, but her hand stayed firmly clasped in his. The vehicle slowed as they approached a modern structure nestled into the mountainside. Glass and steel rose organically from the natural stone, somehow both imposing and invisible among the trees. A gate opened silently as they approached, and the SUV pulled into a covered garage that could have easily fit 10 vehicles. "We're here, sir," the security guard said, opening their door. "Please follow me." Ethan helped Lily out, grabbing their bags before she could reach for hers. The garage elevator opened into a great room that took his breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a stunning valley view, while sleek furniture and state-of-the-art technology filled the space. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, and the kitchen looked like something from a cooking show. "This is like a movie," Lily whispered, her eyes wide as she took in their surroundings. Ethan felt increasingly out of place in his work clothes, still spotted with engine grease. He set their bags down carefully, afraid to touch anything too expensive. "The bedrooms are upstairs," the guard explained, pointing to a floating staircase. "The house is fully stocked with food and necessities. The entire property is monitored 24/7, and there are always 2 teams on rotation outside." Before Ethan could respond, the elevator hummed again. Grace stepped out, looking slightly less polished than usual in a casual blazer and jeans. She'd clearly come straight from work. "I wanted to make sure you got settled in okay," she said, her expression apologetic. "I know this is overwhelming. It's just different," Ethan managed, running a hand through his hair. "We're used to simpler things." Grace moved to the kitchen island, gesturing for them to join her. "Lily, would you like to see your room? It has a wonderful view of the sunset." Lily looked to her father for permission. When he nodded, she followed another security member up the stairs, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. "I'm so sorry about all this, Ethan," Grace said, once Lily was out of earshot. "I never meant to bring danger to your door. If I had known." "You couldn't have known," Ethan interrupted gently. "And you're protecting us now. That counts for something." Grace smiled sadly. "Still, you've already been through so much." She paused, then added, "Would you like some coffee? I could use some myself." Ethan nodded, watching as she moved confidently through the kitchen, finding cups and starting an elaborate coffee maker. The familiar smell helped ground him in the unfamiliar space. "How long do you think we'll need to stay here?" he asked. "A few days, maybe a week," Grace replied, handing him a steaming cup. "My security team is working with the FBI to identify the conspirators. Once we know who's behind this, we can deal with them properly." They fell into comfortable silence, sipping their coffee as the sun began to set. The house's automatic lighting adjusted seamlessly, creating a warm ambiance. "I should start dinner," Ethan said finally, setting down his empty cup. "Lily's probably hungry." "Let me help," Grace offered. "I'm not much of a cook, but I can follow directions." They worked together in the kitchen, Ethan, discovering ingredients in the fully stocked refrigerator, while Grace chopped vegetables with careful precision. The simple act of preparing food helped normalize the bizarre situation. Lily came down as they were finishing, drawn by the smell of cooking. She'd changed into clean clothes and looked more relaxed. "This smells amazing, Dad," she said, taking a seat at the island. During dinner, the conversation flowed more easily. Grace asked Lily about school, genuinely interested in her answers. The teenager gradually opened up, sharing stories about her teachers and friends. After Lily went upstairs to work on homework, Ethan and Grace moved to the living room. The fireplace cast dancing shadows on the walls, and the forest outside had grown dark and mysterious. "You're doing an amazing job with her," Grace said softly. "She's such a remarkable young woman." Ethan smiled, his eyes distant. Her mother would be proud. "Sometimes I worry I'm not enough, but you are," Grace assured. "More than enough. The way you've handled everything life has thrown at you, it's inspiring." "You know something about that too, don't you?" Ethan observed. "Handling whatever life throws at you?" Grace nodded slowly. "Life rarely goes according to plan. The trick is learning to trust that even the hardest moments have purpose." She paused, considering her words carefully. "Sometimes the worst situations lead us exactly where we need to be." They talked for another hour, sharing stories of resilience and loss, of picking up pieces and moving forward. Grace spoke of building her company from nothing, of proving herself in a world that often doubted her. Ethan described learning to be both mother and father to Lily, of keeping hope alive when bills piled up and answers seemed impossible. As the evening grew late, Grace stood to leave. "Try to get some rest," she said. "The security team will keep you safe. I'll check in tomorrow." After she left, Ethan stood at the massive windows, gazing into the darkness beyond. The forest was alive with shadows, and somewhere in the distance, he could see the lights of the security patrol. Strange, he thought, how quickly life could change, how a simple act of kindness on a rainy night could lead to all of this. He touched the cool glass, his reflection ghostly against the darkness beyond. Out there, someone wanted to hurt Grace, and now possibly him and Lily too. Yet here they were, protected in this mountain fortress, caught up in events he still couldn't fully comprehend. Ethan woke to unfamiliar stillness. No rumble of passing trucks, no neighbor's dog barking, just the soft hum of the safe house's air system. Through the wide bedroom windows, morning sunlight filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the polished hardwood floor. He sat up slowly, taking in the luxurious room that felt worlds away from his modest home. The digital clock read 6:45 a.m. Old habits died hard. He'd always been an early riser. In the hallway, he heard the measured footsteps of security personnel making their rounds. After a quick shower in the marble bathroom, which was bigger than his home's kitchen, Ethan made his way downstairs. Agent Marcus Hale stood at the kitchen island, reviewing documents while sipping coffee. "Morning, Mr. Ward," Hale said, looking up. "Coffee's fresh if you'd like some." "Thanks." Ethan poured himself a cup, appreciating the rich aroma. "Any updates?" Hale set down his papers. "We've identified several suspicious transfers within Marotech's accounting system. Someone's been moving money through shell companies. We think the attempt on Miss Morrow's car was meant to silence her before she could discover the full scope. And now my daughter's caught in the middle of it," Ethan said quietly. "We have round-the-clock security here," Hale assured him. "Best team I've worked with." The sound of footsteps on the stairs drew their attention. Lily appeared, all ready, dressed for the day, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Morning, Dad," Agent Hale. Before Ethan could respond, there was a gentle knock at the front door. Two agents outside cleared Grace's arrival, and she entered carrying a box of fresh pastries. "I thought everyone might like breakfast," she said warmly. "Lily, would you help me set these out?" As they arranged the pastries on plates, Grace asked Lily about her classes. Soon they moved to the living room, settling into the comfortable seating area. Ethan busied himself in the kitchen, but kept an ear on their conversation. "My mom used to help me with history projects," Lily was saying. "After she died, it was hard to work on them alone." "I lost my mother when I was young too," Grace replied softly. "It leaves a space nothing else quite fills." "How did you—" Lily hesitated. "How did you keep going?" "One day at a time," Grace said. "I found people who believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. And I promised myself I'd help others facing similar struggles." Ethan's throat tightened as he listened. He'd worried about Lily not having a mother figure, but Grace spoke to her with such genuine understanding. The morning passed quietly. Lily spread her homework across the dining table while Grace took calls in the study. Around noon, Grace invited Ethan to join her in reviewing some Morotech materials. "I want to show you what we really do," she said, pulling up presentations on her laptop. Beyond the corporate side, Ethan watched as she detailed programs supporting veterans, transitioning to civilian work, scholarships for children who'd lost parents, and initiatives helping single parents start businesses. "This one," Grace said, highlighting a particular project, "provides automotive training for veterans, giving them marketable skills. We could use someone with your expertise as an advisor." Ethan studied the program details, seeing faces of people like himself, people working hard to build better lives. "This is incredible work." "It's why I fight so hard to protect the company," Grace said. "These programs change lives. Someone once showed me kindness when I needed it most. Everything I've built is about passing that forward." Throughout the afternoon, Lily and Grace continued talking. Ethan caught fragments about school, dreams for the future, and dealing with loss. His daughter seemed to bloom under Grace's attention, sharing thoughts she usually kept private. As evening approached, Agent Hale suggested a perimeter check. Ethan welcomed the chance to stretch his legs after the long day inside. They walked the grounds, Hale pointing out security features, motion sensors, cameras, reinforced windows. The property has 3 rings of security, he explained. Outer perimeter, immediate grounds, and the house itself. No one gets through without us knowing. How long do you think we'll need to stay here? Ethan asked. Until we identify everyone involved in the Rand conspiracy. Miss Morrow's made enemies by running such a clean operation. Some people preferred the old way of doing business. Hale paused near a security panel. But we're making progress. Just need to keep you and your daughter safe while we wrap this up. They completed the circuit as darkness settled over the mountain. Through the safe house windows, Ethan could see Grace and Lily setting the table for dinner, both laughing at something. Despite the circumstances that brought them here, he felt profound gratitude watching them together. Your daughter's adjusting well, Hale observed. She is, Ethan agreed. Grace she's been good for her. Miss Morrow's been through her own battles, Hale said. Makes her good at helping others through theirs. Morning sunlight streamed through the safe house's tall windows as Ethan, Lily, and Grace finished their breakfast. The kitchen was quiet except for the gentle clink of dishes and the low murmur of security personnel talking in the next room. Ethan had barely touched his eggs, his mind still trying to make sense of how quickly their simple life had changed. 2 investigators entered the kitchen, their expressions serious. Agent Martinez, a woman with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun, placed a tablet on the table while her partner, Agent Chen, stood near the doorway. Miss Morrow, Martinez began, her voice measured. We've uncovered concerning information about the attempt on your vehicle. She glanced at Lily, who was watching intently. Grace nodded. It's okay, they should both hear this. Martinez tapped her tablet. Our investigation suggests the sabotage came from within Morrow Tech itself. Specifically, we believe someone on your board of directors is involved in a plan to steal and sell proprietary technology. Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Though much of the corporate talk went over his head, he understood betrayal well enough. He watched Grace's face, tighten with controlled anger. Do you have names? Grace asked. Not yet, Chen said from the doorway. But we're closing in. The attempt on your car suggests they're getting desperate. Grace stood, smoothing her blazer with practiced calm. Then it's time Mr. Ward sees exactly what they're trying to steal. She turned to Ethan and Lily. Would you both join me at our main facility today? I think it's important you understand what we're protecting. The drive to Morrow Tech's facility took nearly an hour, their SUV convoy moving through winding country roads before emerging onto a vast corporate campus. Lily pressed her face to the window, eyes wide at the sight of gleaming glass buildings stretching across manicured grounds. This is all yours? She asked Grace. Grace smiled. It belongs to a lot of people who work very hard to make the world better. She led them through security checkpoints, each more sophisticated than the last. Ethan felt increasingly out of place in his worn jeans and work boots among the stream of professionals in business attire. In a private elevator, Grace pressed her palm to a scanner. What I'm about to show you is something very few people outside the company have seen. The elevator descended deep underground. When the doors opened, Ethan and Lily stepped into what looked like a scene from a science fiction movie. Through massive windows, they could see laboratories where teams of scientists worked with equipment Ethan couldn't begin to understand. We're developing clean energy systems here, Grace explained, leading them down a corridor. Technology that could provide sustainable power to communities that have never had reliable electricity. But in the wrong hands. It could be weaponized, Ethan finished, beginning to understand the stakes. Grace nodded. Or sold to the highest bidder, regardless of their intentions. They toured more labs and testing facilities, Grace explaining their work in terms Ethan and Lily could grasp. During a break in a comfortable conference room, Grace's professional facade softened. When I first took over Morrow Tech, she said, settling into a chair across from Ethan, everyone thought I was too young, too naive. They didn't know about the years I spent rebuilding myself after. She paused, her fingers tracing the rim of her water glass. After escaping an abusive relationship, Lily reached over and squeezed Grace's hand. The gesture seemed to surprise and touch Grace deeply. Sometimes the hardest part was feeling so alone. Grace continued, until a stranger helped me one night, years ago. He didn't know me, but he stopped to help anyway. It taught me that kindness matters more than power. Ethan felt an odd stirring of memory, but before he could pursue it, Grace turned to him. "What about you? How did you manage after losing your wife?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "One day at a time," he said finally. "Lily gave me a reason to keep going, and I learned that helping others, fixing their cars, solving their problems, it helped me forget my own troubles for a while." Grace's eyes softened with understanding. They sat in comfortable silence until Lily spoke up. "Dad fixes everything," she said proudly. "Not just cars. He fixed Mrs. Henderson's wheelchair last month, and he wouldn't take any money for it." "That doesn't surprise me at all," Grace replied, looking at Ethan with warmth that made him glance away, uncomfortable with praise. As they prepared to leave the facility, Grace's phone buzzed. Her face changed as she read the message, color draining from her cheeks. She stepped away to take the call, speaking in low, urgent tones that Ethan couldn't quite hear. When she returned, her professional mask was back in place, but Ethan could see tension in her shoulders. She ushered them quickly toward the exit, not mentioning the call that had so clearly disturbed her. Their convoy of SUVs formed up around them as they left the facility. Ethan watched Grace through the window as she climbed into her own vehicle, wondering what new threat had emerged to shake her usual confidence. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the safe house windows as Ethan sat at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a warm cup of coffee. The events of the past few days felt surreal, like something from a movie rather than his quiet life. Grace stood by the window, her phone pressed to her ear as she spoke in hushed tones about company matters. The sharp rap of knuckles on the front door made them both jump. 2 security agents swept in, followed by a tall woman in a navy blazer carrying a metal briefcase. Her ID badge identified her as Dr. Sarah Chen, Marotech's head forensic engineer. "Mr. Ward," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Sarah. We could really use your expertise." Ethan wiped his palms on his jeans before shaking her hand. "Just Ethan is fine, and I'm happy to help however I can." Dr. Chen placed her briefcase on the table and clicked it open. "These are the components we recovered from Miss Morrow's vehicle." She carefully lifted out several engine parts wrapped in protective cloth. "Something's not adding up in our analysis." Grace moved closer, her arms crossed. The worry lines around her eyes had deepened over the past few days. "What do you mean?" "The sabotage was sophisticated," Dr. Chen explained, unwrapping each part with gloved hands. "But there are inconsistencies in the method, almost like whoever did this was trying too hard to make it look professional." Ethan leaned forward, studying the dismantled pieces. His weathered hands hovered over them, not touching yet, but taking in the overall picture. 25 years of fixing engines had taught him to read mechanical problems like a language. "May I?" he asked, reaching for a pair of latex gloves that Dr. Chen offered. The room fell silent as Ethan examined each component. His fingers moved with precision, turning the parts over, testing connections. His expression grew more focused, the way it did when he was deep in a difficult repair. "Here," he said finally, holding up what looked like a damaged fuel injection component. "See these marks?" Dr. Chen adjusted her glasses, leaning in. "Yes, we noted the scoring pattern. It's wrong." Ethan grabbed a notepad from the counter and sketched quickly. If someone wanted to cause a gradual fuel system failure, they'd damage it here and here. He pointed to specific spots on his drawing. That's what an expert would do. But these marks. He indicated the actual part. They're in places that would cause immediate failure. It's like they knew enough to access the system, but not enough to sabotage it effectively. Grace moved closer, her shoulder nearly touching his as she studied the part. "What does that tell us?" "It means our suspect pool just got a lot smaller," Dr. Chen said, typing rapidly on her tablet. "We're not looking for someone with deep mechanical expertise. We're looking for someone with access to secure areas, but only basic mechanical knowledge." Ethan nodded, still examining the parts. "There's something else." He picked up another component, this one from the electrical system. "See how clean these connection points are? Usually, when you're working on an engine this size, you get residue here, but someone cleaned these thoroughly before tampering with them." "Like someone following clean room protocols," Dr. Chen breathed. "Someone used to working with sensitive technology, not engines." "Exactly." Ethan set the part down carefully. "And look at these tool marks. They're not from standard automotive tools. These are precision instruments, probably custom made. The kind you'd use on specialized technical equipment, Grace finished, her voice tight. Like the kind we use in our research labs. Dr. Chen was already on her phone, speaking rapidly to someone. Give me a list of all personnel with both cleanroom access and garage clearance for the past month, and check the tool inventory from Lab 6. Ethan sat back, suddenly aware of how intensely everyone was staring at him. He rubbed the back of his neck, uncomfortable with the attention. It's nothing special, just things you notice after working on engines for so long. Grace touched his shoulder gently. Don't diminish this, Ethan. You just gave us exactly what we needed, a way to narrow down our search. That's far from nothing. He met her eyes and saw something there beyond gratitude, a warmth that made his heart skip a beat. But before he could respond, Dr. Chen was gathering the parts with urgent efficiency. I need to get these back to the lab immediately, she said, securing the briefcase. We'll run new analyses based on Mr. Ward's observations. Miss Morrow, I'll update you as soon as we have anything concrete. Within minutes, Dr. Chen and her team had swept out of the safe house, leaving Ethan and Grace alone in the suddenly quiet kitchen. The late afternoon sun painted the room an amber light, and somewhere in the house, they could hear Lily practicing her presentation for school. Grace sank into the chair next to Ethan, looking both exhausted and energized. Thank you, she said softly. You have no idea how much this helps. Ethan shrugged, pushing the empty coffee cup between his hands. I just hope it leads to something useful. The sooner this is resolved, the sooner Lily can get back to her normal life. Grace studied him for a long moment. You know what amazes me about you, Ethan? You just provided crucial evidence in a corporate espionage case, and your first thought is still about your daughter's well-being. The morning sun streamed through the safe house windows, casting warm patches of light across the hardwood floors. Ethan stood at the kitchen counter, methodically stirring cream into his coffee while Lily sat cross-legged on the couch, her textbook spread around her like a paper fortress. The past few days had settled into an oddly comfortable routine, despite the circumstances that brought them here. A gentle knock preceded Grace's entrance. She walked in with her usual grace, but today her shoulders seemed lighter, her smile easier. Behind her, 2 investigators followed, their faces similarly relaxed. Good morning, Grace said, accepting the cup of coffee Ethan offered. We have some encouraging news. Agent Torres, the lead investigator, stepped forward. Our surveillance indicates the immediate threat has decreased significantly. We've identified several key suspects, and they appear to be backing off, likely realizing we're onto them. Does this mean we can go home? Lily asked, looking up from her homework. Soon, Agent Torres replied. We still need to maintain some security measures, but we're moving in the right direction. Grace set her coffee down and smoothed her blazer, a gesture Ethan had come to recognize as her way of transitioning to business matters. Given the improved situation, I've decided to proceed with Morrowtech's annual charity gala this weekend. It's one of our most important fundraising events for local education initiatives. She turned to face Ethan and Lily directly. I'd like both of you to attend as my honored guests. Ethan nearly choked on his coffee. A gala? The word felt foreign in his mouth. His world was motor oil and socket wrenches, not champagne and formal wear. Please say yes. Lily bounced on the couch, her algebra homework forgotten. I've never been to anything fancy like that. Grace's eyes crinkled with amusement. It would mean a lot to have you there. After all, Ethan, your mechanical insight helped break this case open. You deserve to be recognized. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, discomfort evident in his posture. I appreciate the offer, but we don't exactly have clothes for something like that. Already taken care of. Grace replied with a knowing smile. She checked her watch. In fact, right on cue, another knock echoed through the room. A security agent opened the door to reveal a distinguished-looking man carrying several garment bags. His silver hair was immaculately styled, and his suit looked like it cost more than Ethan's truck. This is Marcus, Grace introduced. He's the finest tailor in Nashville, and he's here to ensure you both have proper attire for Saturday night. Lily practically flew off the couch. Really? Like in the movies? Marcus smiled warmly, setting his bags down with practiced care. Exactly like in the movies, young lady. Shall we begin with you? The next hour transformed the safe house living room into an impromptu fitting room. Marcus worked with practiced efficiency, his measuring tape dancing around Lily as she stood still, barely containing her excitement. He pulled out a deep blue dress that made her gasp. This is just for initial sizing, Marcus explained, helping Lily into the dress. The Final piece will be even more special. Ethan watched his daughter twirl in front of the mirror, her face glowing with joy. It had been so long since he'd seen her this happy, this carefree. Something in his chest tightened. Grace moved to stand beside him. "She looks beautiful," she said softly. "Yeah," Ethan managed, his voice rough. Her mother would have loved seeing this. When it was Ethan's turn, Marcus approached with professional determination. "Now, sir, let's find something that reflects your dignity while maintaining comfort." Ethan endured the measuring process with as much grace as he could muster. Trying not to feel self-conscious as the tailor worked, Marcus selected a charcoal gray suit that somehow made Ethan look both elegant and approachable. "Perfect," Grace commented from her spot by the window. "Distinguished but not flashy. It suits you." The fitting process took most of the morning. By the time Marcus packed up his supplies, promising to return with the finished garments in 2 days, Ethan felt mentally exhausted. It was one thing to be under protective custody. It was another entirely to be preparing for a high society event. The rest of the day passed in a blur of security briefings and logistics discussions. Lily spent hours online researching proper gala etiquette, occasionally sharing random facts about which fork to use for salad or how to properly hold a champagne glass. As evening settled in, Ethan found himself alone on the safe house's back porch. The security lights cast a soft glow over the manicured lawn, and crickets chirped in the distance. He sat in one of the comfortable outdoor chairs, trying to process the day's events. A week ago, he'd been worried about keeping his shop's lights on. Now he was preparing to attend a black-tie gala as the guest of a CEO. His daughter was getting a custom-made formal dress. People with advanced degrees were asking for his opinion on security matters. For the first time in years, the weight of constant worry had lifted slightly from his shoulders. The Marotech contract alone would secure his business's future. But beyond that, he felt something he hadn't experienced since before his wife's passing: hope. It wasn't just about financial security. Watching Lily's excitement today, seeing her bond with Grace, feeling part of something larger than his daily struggles, it all added up to a sense of possibility he'd almost forgotten could exist. He leaned back in the chair, looking up at the stars, peeking through the trees. The future still held uncertainty, but for the first time in a long while, that uncertainty didn't feel threatening. Instead, it felt like promise. The Marotech Foundation's annual charity gala transformed the city's grandest hotel ballroom into a glittering wonderland. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble floors, while arrangements of white roses and pale blue hydrangeas adorned every table. Well-dressed guests filtered through the entrance, their evening wear catching the light like precious gems. Ethan Ward stood just inside the doorway, tugging at his bow tie. The new tuxedo felt stiff and foreign compared to his usual work clothes, but the tailor had done an excellent job making him look presentable. Beside him, Lily beamed in a simple but elegant pale blue dress that made her look older than her 15 years. "You okay, Dad?" Lily whispered, squeezing his arm. Her eyes were wide with wonder as she took in the grand space. "Just feeling a bit out of place," he admitted quietly, watching as people in designer clothes moved past them. A server offered them champagne and sparkling cider from a silver tray. Ethan accepted the cider for both of them, grateful for something to do with his hands. "Mr. Ward," Grace's warm voice cut through his anxiety as she approached them. She wore a floor-length navy gown that seemed to float around her as she walked. "I'm so glad you both made it. This is amazing." Lily breathed, still looking around in awe. Grace smiled at her enthusiasm. "Wait until you try the chocolate fountain at the dessert table." She turned to Ethan, her expression softening. "You clean up quite nicely, Mr. Ward." Before Ethan could respond, Grace was called away to greet other guests. He and Lily found their assigned table near the front of the room, marked with elegant place cards. They were joined by several of Grace's executive team members who, to Ethan's relief, turned out to be down-to-earth and friendly. As dinner wound down, Grace took the stage. The ballroom lights dimmed slightly and conversations hushed as she approached the microphone. She cut an impressive figure in the spotlight, poised and confident. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight to support Marotech Foundation's educational initiatives." Her voice carried clearly through the space. "Tonight, I want to talk about the power of compassion and how a single act of kindness can change." She paused, her eyes finding Ethan in the crowd. "A week ago, on a stormy night, my car broke down on a dark road. I was alone, frightened, and uncertain. Then a stranger pulled over. Not because he had to, not because he knew who I was, but simply because he saw someone in need. Ethan felt his face grow warm as hundreds of eyes turned toward him. Lily grabbed his hand under the table, squeezing it tight. This man, Ethan Ward, spent 45 minutes in pouring rain, getting soaked to the bone, just to help a stranger. When I tried to pay him, he refused. He asked for nothing in return. Grace's voice carried emotion now. That's the kind of compassion we strive to foster through our foundation's work. Small acts of kindness that ripple outward, changing lives in ways we may never know. The crowd broke into warm applause. Ethan wanted to sink into his chair, but Lily's proud smile kept him upright. Please join me in thanking Mr. Ward for reminding us that kindness still exists in this world, Grace concluded. The applause grew louder. Several people stood, starting a wave of standing ovations. Ethan reluctantly rose when Lily tugged at his sleeve, nodding awkwardly at the crowd. As the formal program concluded and music began to play, a steady stream of guests approached their table. Business leaders, philanthropists, and community figures all wanted to shake Ethan's hand and praise his actions. He received their compliments with quiet dignity, though Lily noticed how he deflected attention whenever possible. "Your father is quite remarkable," an elderly woman told Lily after introducing herself as a longtime Marotech board member. "We need more people like him in this world." "I know," Lily replied, beaming. "He's always been like that. He helps everyone, even when we barely have enough ourselves." As the evening progressed, Grace made her way back to their table. She found Ethan watching Lily, who was now chatting animatedly with a group of teenage children of other guests. "She's flourishing," Grace observed, taking a seat beside him. "Though I suspect she got that from you, that ability to connect with people." Ethan shook his head. "That's all her mother in her. Sarah never met a stranger she couldn't turn into a friend." "You miss her very much," Grace said softly. "It wasn't a question. Every day," Ethan replied, his voice quiet but steady. "But Lily makes it easier. She has so much of her mother's light in her." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the dancers swirl across the floor. The orchestra played something slow and elegant. "Thank you," Ethan said finally. "Not just for tonight, but for everything you've done for us this past week. Protecting us, making Lily feel special." Grace turned to face him, her expression earnest. "You don't realize how special you are, do you?" Both of you. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a mutual recognition of kindred. Spirits who understood loss, resilience, and the courage to keep going. The moment was interrupted by Lily's return. "Dad, they're serving the desserts now. You have to try this chocolate thing they have." Near midnight, the gala began winding down. Ethan and Lily followed Grace out to the waiting motorcade, their hearts light despite their tiredness. The city lights sparkled through the tinted windows as they drove through the quiet streets, and Lily soon dozed off against her father's shoulder. "Was it terrible?" Grace asked softly from across the car, a hint of teasing in her voice. Ethan looked down at his sleeping daughter, then back at Grace. "No," he admitted with a small smile. "It wasn't terrible at all." The motorcade glided through the Tennessee night, a chain of black SUVs cutting through darkness like a stream of shadows. Inside the middle vehicle, Lily had kicked off her heels and curled up against her father's shoulder, the sparkles of her new dress catching the passing streetlights. Ethan's arm wrapped protectively around her, his tuxedo jacket draped over her shoulders to keep her warm. "That was amazing, Dad," Lily murmured, her eyes heavy with contentment. "Did you see how everyone clapped for you?" "Just folks being polite," Ethan said softly, though the warmth of the evening's acceptance still lingered in his chest. Grace sat across from them, her elegant evening gown pooling around her feet. She'd been typing on her phone but looked up with a gentle smile. "They weren't just being polite, Ethan. You've earned their respect." The convoy turned onto a darker stretch of road, leaving the city lights behind. Pine trees loomed on either side, their branches reaching over the pavement like grasping fingers. The security team had insisted on taking this less traveled route back to the safe house. A sudden flash of headlights in the side mirror caught Ethan's attention. A black pickup truck appeared behind them, moving fast. Too fast. The security radio crackled. Hostile vehicle approaching from 6 o'clock. Everything happened at once. The pickup accelerated, engine roaring, as it tried to ram their SUV. The driver swerved at the last second, their vehicle lurching sideways. Lily screamed, clutching Ethan's arm. "Get down!" the security agent in the front seat shouted. Ethan pulled Lily to the floor, shielding her with his body. Grace dropped beside them, her perfectly styled hair falling around her face. The convoy's rear vehicles blocked the pickup's path, forcing it to veer onto the shoulder. Gravel sprayed against their windows. Through the chaos, Ethan could hear Lily's rapid breathing, feel her trembling against him. "It's okay, sweetheart," he whispered, though his own heart hammered against his ribs. "I've got you." Their driver executed a series of sharp turns, while the other security vehicles engaged the threat. The pickup tried to keep pace, but couldn't match the skilled defensive driving. After a few more desperate attempts to break through their protection, the attacker's truck suddenly veered off onto a side road, disappearing into the darkness. "Target is retreating," the radio announced. "All units maintain defensive formation." The rest of the drive passed in tense silence. Lily remained curled against Ethan, refusing to return to her seat. Grace's face had turned pale, her earlier joy replaced by a mix of anger and devastation. When they finally reached the safe house, security teams swept the perimeter before allowing them inside. In the bright kitchen light, Ethan could see tear tracks on Lily's cheeks, her pretty dress wrinkled from hiding on the floor. "I'm so sorry," Grace said, her voice tight with emotion. "This is my fault. I never should have put you in danger by taking you to such a public event." Before Ethan could respond, two investigators burst in, their faces grim. "Mr. Ward, we need to talk, now." They gathered in the living room. Lily refused to leave her father's side, so they spoke carefully around her. "The attack confirms our worst fears," the lead investigator said. "Our sources indicate the conspirators believe you possess crucial evidence about their operation." "But I don't have anything," Ethan protested. "I just fixed a car in the rain." "You noticed something about that engine that led us to a breakthrough." They know that, and they're desperate enough to try eliminating any possible threat. Grace paced the room, her heels clicking against the hardwood. "This is unacceptable. I want security doubled. No one gets within a mile of this house without clearance." The investigators nodded and continued outlining new protective measures. Ethan barely heard them. All he could think about was how his simple act of kindness had put his daughter in the crosshairs of dangerous people. Later that night, after much coaxing, Lily finally agreed to sleep in her own room. Two agents stood guard in the hallway. Grace had retreated to make urgent phone calls to her security team. Ethan lay in his bed, still wearing his dress shirt and slacks, too wired to change. The ceiling fan spun lazy circles above him, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the pickup truck bearing down on them, heard Lily's frightened cry. Guilt gnawed at his insides like a living thing. If he hadn't stopped that night in the rain, if he hadn't accepted Grace's offer, if he hadn't agreed to go to the gala, Lily would be safe in their little house, worried about normal teenage things instead of violent attacks. The moonlight through his window cast shadows that seemed to writhe and dance. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called, but it sounded like a warning. Ethan stared into the darkness, his daughter's fear and Grace's anguished apology playing on repeat in his mind. He'd always tried to do the right thing, to help others when he could. But now, that simple moral code had drawn his family into something dangerous, something that might hurt the person he loved most in the world. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on his chest until he could barely breathe. The night stretched endless before him, filled with regret and fear for what tomorrow might bring. Morning crept into the safe house with all the warmth of a winter shadow. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, his coffee growing cold between his hands as he stared out the window. The events of last night played over and over in his mind. The screech of tires, Lily's terrified scream, the violent swerve of their vehicle. Security personnel moved quietly through the house, their faces tight with concern. The morning light did nothing to ease the heavy atmosphere that had settled over everything like a thick blanket. Lily appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, her eyes red and puffy from a night of poor sleep. She hesitated before walking over to sit beside her father. "Dad?" Her voice was small, uncertain. Ethan reached out and squeezed her hand. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "Scared," she admitted, pulling her knees up to her chest. "But I'm trying to be brave." The words struck Ethan like physical blows. His daughter shouldn't have to be brave. She shouldn't have to fear for her life because of his choices. He swallowed hard, his decision crystallizing in his mind. "I need to make a phone call," he said softly, standing up. "Why don't you get some breakfast?" In the quiet of the study, Ethan dialed his sister Sarah's number. She answered on the second ring, already aware of some of their situation from news reports about the gala. "Sarah, I need a favor," he said, his voice rough. "I need Lily to stay with you for a while, just until things settle down." There was a pause on the other end. "Of course, Ethan. You know she's always welcome here." He worked out the details with her, his chest tightening with each word. When he hung up, he found Grace standing in the doorway, her face etched with concern. "Ethan," she said softly, "you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." He moved past her into the hallway, but she followed. "We can increase security, move you both to a different location, and wait for the next attack?" Ethan turned to face her, his voice tight with emotion. "That truck could have killed her, Grace. My daughter could have died because I got mixed up in all this. This isn't your fault." Grace insisted, reaching for his arm. "You're being targeted because you helped me. Let me help protect you both." "I appreciate everything you've done," Ethan said, gently pulling away. "But I can't risk Lily's safety." "I won't." He found Lily in the kitchen, pushing cereal around in her bowl. When he told her about staying with her aunt, her face crumpled. "But Dad, I want to stay with you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "We're supposed to stick together." Ethan knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Listen to me, sweetheart. The most important thing in my life is keeping you safe. Right now, that means staying with Aunt Sarah for a little while." "But what about you?" Lily's voice broke. "Who's going to keep you safe?" "I'll be fine," he assured her, though his heart ached at the lie. "This is just temporary, until we sort everything out." Grace watched from the doorway, her own eyes glistening. She stepped forward, kneeling beside them both. "Lily," she said softly, "I promise you, I'll do everything in my power to protect your father and resolve this quickly." Lily looked between them, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "You promise?" "I promise," Grace said firmly. The next hour passed in a blur of packing and preparations. Sarah arrived with a security escort, her face tight with worry as she hugged her brother and niece. Lily's small suitcase looked wrong somehow, too final, as it was loaded into the SUV. Ethan held his daughter tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, trying to memorize everything about this moment. "I love you so much," he whispered into her hair. "Be good for Aunt Sarah, okay?" Lily nodded against his chest, her tears soaking into his shirt. "I love you too, Dad. Please be careful." She hugged Grace goodbye, surprising the older woman with the fierceness of her embrace. Then she climbed into the SUV beside her aunt, her face pressed against the window as the vehicle started moving. Ethan stood on the porch, every fiber of his being screaming to call them back, to keep his daughter close where he could protect her. But he forced himself to stay still, watching as the SUV disappeared down the long driveway and into the morning mist. The silence that followed felt like a physical presence, heavy and accusing. Inside the house, he could hear the quiet movements of security personnel, the soft murmur of voices, but out here on the porch, he was alone with the weight of his decision. He didn't move, even as the morning chill seeped through his clothes. In his mind, he could still hear Lily's scream from the night before, could still feel her trembling against him as they huddled on the floor of the SUV. The memory strengthened his resolve, even as it tore at his heart. Behind him, the screen door creaked open, but he didn't turn around. He knew it was Grace, could sense her hesitation before she spoke. "She'll be safe there, Ethan," she said quietly. "Sarah's house is being watched by our best security team." Ethan nodded, his eyes still fixed on the empty driveway where the SUV had disappeared. He didn't trust himself to speak, afraid his voice would betray how close he was to breaking. The gravel driveway stretched away into the morning fog like a road into uncertainty, taking his daughter further from danger and further from him. It was the right decision, he told himself. The only decision a father could make. But standing there in the cold morning air, watching the mist swallow the last traces of his daughter's departure, it felt like the hardest thing he'd ever done. Evening settled over the safe house like a heavy quilt, bringing with it a silence that seemed to echo through every room. The last rays of sunlight filtered through the kitchen windows, casting long shadows across the polished hardwood floors. The security team had stepped outside for their regular perimeter check, their muffled voices carrying briefly through the walls before fading into the distance, leaving Ethan alone at the kitchen table. Without Lily's presence, the house felt empty, devoid of the warmth that his daughter's spirit always brought to any space she occupied. Even the most elegant surroundings couldn't fill the hollow ache of her absence. The kitchen clock ticked steadily on the wall, its brass pendulum catching the fading light as it marked time in the quietness. Each second stretched longer than the last, measured and methodical. Outside, crickets had begun their nightly chorus, a sound that reminded Ethan of simpler days when his biggest worry had been making ends meet at the shop. The familiar rhythm transported him back to summer evenings on their small front porch, when Sarah would sit beside him after dinner and Lily would chase fireflies in the yard. Now, those concerns seemed almost quaint compared to the crushing weight pressing down on his shoulders like a physical burden he couldn't shake. Ethan's callous fingers traced the smooth wooden grain of the table, so different from their worn kitchen furniture at home with its nicks and scratches that told the story of their family life. Everything in this safe house spoke of wealth and security, from the granite countertops to the gleaming stainless steel appliances, yet he'd never felt more vulnerable or out of place. The luxury felt foreign against his weathered hands, a constant reminder of how far he was from the simple life he understood. His mind drifted to Sarah, his late wife, and how she would have handled this impossible situation. She had always been the stronger one emotionally, the anchor in their little family who knew exactly what to say to calm his fears and steady his nerves. Her voice had been his compass through every storm they'd weathered together. Sarah would have seen through the complexity to the heart of the matter, would have known whether staying was courage or cowardice. "I wish you were here, Sarah," he whispered to the empty room, his voice barely audible above the clock's persistent ticking. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing anymore. I feel like I'm drowning, and I can't even see the surface." The memory of her smile, warm and reassuring like morning sunlight, filled his thoughts with bittersweet clarity. She had faced her illness with such grace and unwavering faith, never letting fear overcome her trust in God's plan. Even in her final days, when the cancer had stolen her strength and left her frail in the hospital bed, she had been more concerned about him and Lily than herself. Her selflessness had humbled him then and continued to humble him now. Ethan's eyes burned with unshed tears as he remembered their last real conversation, before the morphine had clouded her thoughts and stolen her lucid moments. The hospital room had smelled of antiseptic and wilted flowers, but Sarah's hand in his had still been warm. "Promise me you'll keep your heart open," she had said, her voice weak but determined. "Don't let fear close you off from life. Don't let it turn you into someone who's afraid to love again." He had promised her then, meaning every word. But now, sitting in this pristine kitchen that belonged to a world he didn't understand, Ethan wondered if he was breaking that promise with every step backward he took. The weight of recent events pressed down on him like an avalanche he couldn't escape. The attack on the convoy with its shattering glass and screaming metal, Lily's frightened face when she'd realized their quiet life was over, the growing complexity of his connection to Grace, and her dangerous, glittering world. For the first time since Sarah's death, Ethan felt completely lost, adrift without the moral certainty that had always guided him. He clasped his hands together on the table, the familiar gesture steadying him slightly as he bowed his head. The kitchen light created a small circle of warmth around him in the gathering darkness. His voice, when it came, was rough with emotion and honest desperation. "Lord, I haven't asked for much since you called her home. But I need your guidance now more than I ever have. I need to know if I'm protecting Lily or just running scared like a coward. I need strength to face whatever's coming our way and clarity to see the right path when everything looks dark." His prayer hung in the air, simple and honest, carrying the weight of a father's love and a man's fear. The kitchen remained quiet except for the steady ticking of the clock and the distant sound of crickets weaving their gentle song through the night air. A soft knock at the back door startled him from his thoughts, gentle but insistent. Through the window, he could see Grace's familiar silhouette, illuminated by the warm glow of the porch light. She held something in her arms, what looked like an old cardboard box, worn and taped together. Even from a distance, he could see the tension in her posture, the careful way she held herself as if she might break. Ethan wiped his eyes quickly with the back of his hand and stood to let her in, his chair scraping softly against the floor. She looked different tonight, less like the polished CEO who commanded boardrooms and more like someone who had also been wrestling with heavy thoughts and sleepless nights. Her normally perfect hair was slightly disheveled, as if she'd been running her fingers through it in frustration, and her usual confident bearing seemed fragile around the edges. "I'm sorry to come by so late," she said softly as she stepped inside, her voice carrying an unusual uncertainty. I know you probably want to be alone with everything that's happened, but there's something I need to share with you. Something I can't put off any longer." Ethan gestured toward the kitchen table, noting the careful way she moved, as if she were carrying something more fragile than a simple box. They sat down across from each other, the familiar arrangement somehow different now in the evening light. The box Grace carried was old and worn at the corners, held together with yellowed packing tape that spoke of years of careful storage. She placed it carefully on the table between them, her hands lingering on its surface as if drawing strength from its presence. "I've been holding on to this for years," she said, her fingers resting lightly on the box's faded lid. The cardboard showed water stains and age marks, evidence of a long journey through time. "Waiting for the right moment, I suppose. Or maybe I've just been afraid to face it all again, to open doors I thought I'd closed forever." In the soft kitchen light, Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands trembled slightly as they rested on the mysterious box. Whatever was inside clearly held enormous significance for her, carried emotional weight that made her movements careful and deliberate. The confident executive had been replaced by someone vulnerable and uncertain. "Before I show you what's in here," Grace continued, lifting her eyes to meet his across the table, "I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you that first day in your shop when I walked through your door like a stranger." She took a deep breath, steadying herself against whatever revelation was coming. The truth about how our paths crossed long before that rainy night. The truth about why finding you again felt like a miracle I didn't deserve. Ethan leaned forward slightly, his own troubles momentarily forgotten in the face of Grace's obvious emotional struggle. The weight of her words hung between them, heavy with implication and unspoken history. The cricket songs seemed to grow louder in the pause that followed, filling the space between them with their gentle chorus, as if nature itself was holding its breath. "I'm listening," he said quietly, his voice gentle and free of judgment, carrying the same patient kindness that had always been his way. Whatever Grace needed to tell him, whatever burden she'd been carrying alone, he would hear it without condemnation. Grace's fingers tightened on the box as she prepared to speak, her knuckles white against the faded cardboard. The weight of untold history hung in the air between them like a bridge, waiting to be crossed, connecting past and present in ways Ethan couldn't yet imagine. The living room of the safe house was dimly lit by a single table lamp, casting long shadows across the expensive furniture. Ethan sat in a leather armchair, his shoulders heavy with the weight of sending Lily away. Across from him, Grace perched on the edge of the sofa, holding a worn manila envelope in her hands. Her usual corporate polish had softened, replaced by an air of vulnerability that made her seem younger somehow. "There's something I need to tell you," Grace said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something I've been trying to find the right moment to share." Her fingers trembled slightly as they traced the edge of the envelope. Ethan leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped together. "What is it?" Grace took a deep breath, gathering her courage. 12 years ago, I was in a very different place in my life. I was pregnant, scared, and running from an abusive relationship. She paused, collecting herself. I had nothing, no money, no family to turn to. My ex had isolated me from everyone. Ethan's expression softened with compassion, but there was no recognition in his eyes yet. He listened intently as Grace continued. "One night, I collapsed outside a small clinic in Memphis. I was bleeding, terrified for my baby." Her voice cracked slightly. "The clinic was closing, but a man insisted on paying for my emergency care. He didn't just pay, he sat with me while I waited for the doctor, told me I was stronger than I knew, that I could build a new life." Something flickered across Ethan's face, a distant memory stirring. "He gave me hope when I had none," Grace said, opening the envelope with careful movements. "He told me something I've never forgotten. He said, 'Sometimes the darkest storms bring us exactly where we need to be.'" Ethan's breath caught in his throat. His hands gripped the arms of his chair as the memory rushed back. A rainy night, a scared young woman, words of encouragement offered without thought of reward. Grace pulled out a crumpled receipt from the envelope, preserved carefully after all these years. "You paid $842.37 for a stranger's medical care that night, Ethan? You gave me everything you had in your savings, though you didn't tell me that part then." Ethan's eyes widened as he stared at the receipt, his own signature scrawled at the bottom. I remember that night. You were so young, so afraid." His voice trailed off as the full weight of the revelation settled over him. "That baby survived because of you," Grace said softly. I survived because of you. Your kindness gave me the strength to start over, to build Marotech from nothing. She wiped away a tear. I spent years trying to find you, to thank you properly. But life kept pulling me in different directions, building the company, raising my son, trying to make a difference in the world the way you made a difference for me. Ethan sat back, overwhelmed. Your son? Is he? Grace smiled through her tears. He's 12 now, in private school in Boston, safe, happy, thriving. Because of you. I never knew, Ethan whispered. That night, it was just what needed to be done. Anyone would have. No, Grace interrupted gently. Not anyone would have done what you did. You gave everything you had to a complete stranger. You showed me what real humanity looks like. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. And now, after all these years, fate brought us together again on another rainy night. The silence in the room grew thick with emotion. Ethan's eyes glistened as he processed the incredible connection between past and present. His quiet act of compassion had rippled through time, touching lives in ways he never could have imagined. All these years he managed, his voice rough with emotion. All your success, your philanthropy, you've been paying that kindness forward. Grace nodded. Every program we've created to help single parents, every scholarship, every chance we've given to someone who just needs a helping hand, it all started with you. With that night. She reached across and touched his hand. You saved my life long before you knew my name, Ethan. Silent tears rolled down Ethan's cheeks as the truth of Grace's words washed over him. In all his years of quiet struggle, of doubting his worth, he had never imagined that one act of kindness could have sparked such profound change in the world. Morning sunlight streamed through the safe house windows, casting warm rectangles across the hardwood floors. Ethan sat at the kitchen counter, his hands wrapped around a coffee mug that had long since gone cold. He'd barely slept, his mind replaying Grace's revelation from the night before. The sudden crunch of tires on gravel made him look up. Through the window, he watched 3 black SUVs roll to a stop in front of the house. The security team stationed outside immediately moved to verify the new arrivals. Agent Phillips, the lead investigator Ethan had come to know over the past days, stepped out of the first vehicle. 2 other agents followed, carrying thick folders and laptop cases. Their expressions were focused, urgent. Grace appeared from her temporary office down the hall, her heels clicking against the floor. They must have found something, she said, touching Ethan's shoulder briefly as she passed. The investigators filed into the safe house's main living room. Agent Phillips wasted no time, spreading documents across the coffee table while one of his colleagues set up a laptop. Mr. Ward, Phillips began, your mechanical observation about the sabotage method was exactly what we needed. The specific technique you identified? It's only taught at 3 specialized facilities in the country. We cross-referenced that with Marotech board member backgrounds and security clearances. Grace leaned forward, her usually composed features tense. You found our traitor? Phillips nodded grimly. Harrison Wells. He's been on your board for 8 years. But what you didn't know is that before that, he worked as a specialized mechanic for a defense contractor. The same contractor that trained personnel in the exact method used to sabotage your car? Ethan watched Grace's face pale slightly. Harrison? But he's been instrumental in our military contracts division. That's exactly why he was positioned perfectly for this, Phillips explained. We've uncovered evidence that he's planning to sell classified propulsion technology to foreign buyers. Technology that could revolutionize military aircraft capabilities. The second agent opened his laptop, turning it to show them surveillance photos. We've been monitoring his movements. He's planning to move the stolen tech within the next 48 hours. But here's where it gets complicated, and where we need Mr. Ward's help again. Phillips spread out several technical diagrams. Wells is hiding the stolen tech inside modified vehicle parts. Regular scanning equipment won't detect it because it's been seamlessly integrated into what appears to be normal automotive components. We need someone with deep mechanical knowledge who can spot what doesn't belong. Ethan studied the diagrams, his experience to bail, eyes catching subtle irregularities that most would miss. These cooling system modifications, they're not right. They've been altered to house something else. Exactly. Phillips confirmed. We need you to help us identify which vehicles are being used to transport the tech. We've located a warehouse facility where we believe the components are being prepared for transport. but we need your expertise on the ground to pinpoint exactly what we're looking for." Grace stood up suddenly, shaking her head. "It's too dangerous. Ethan's already been through enough because of this situation. I can't ask him to—" "I'll do it," Ethan interrupted quietly, but firmly. Everyone in the room turned to look at him. He set down the technical diagrams and met Grace's worried gaze. "I spent too many years after Sarah died letting fear control my choices," he explained. "Always playing it safe, always worried about what might go wrong, but sometimes doing the right thing means taking risks." Grace moved closer to him. "Ethan, you don't owe me anything, especially not after everything that's happened to you and Lily because of me." "This isn't about owing anyone," he replied, his voice gentle but determined. "This is about not letting people like Wells hurt others. About showing Lily that her father stands up for what's right, even when it's hard." Agent Phillips cleared his throat. "We'll have a full tactical team in place. Mr. Ward would be thoroughly protected and would only need to examine vehicles we've already secured. We need his eyes and expertise, nothing more." Ethan nodded. "When do we leave?" "We have a briefing team waiting at our field office," Phillips answered. "They'll walk you through everything you need to know about the operation. We move tonight." The next hour passed in a blur of preparation. Ethan changed into the tactical gear provided by the agents, dark clothing that would help him blend into the shadows of the warehouse. He studied detailed layouts of the facility and memorized the communication protocols the team would use. As the agents packed up their equipment, Grace pulled Ethan aside. Her eyes were bright with emotion. "You're one of the most remarkable men I've ever known," she said softly. "First helping me all those years ago when I was at my lowest point, then that night in the rain, and now this. You never hesitate to help others, even at great cost to yourself." Ethan felt his cheeks warm at her praise. "I'm just a mechanic trying to do what's right." "You're far more than that," Grace insisted. "Please, be careful tonight. Come back safely." Agent Phillips approached them. "Mr. Ward, it's time to head to the field office for final briefing." Ethan took a deep breath and squared his shoulders. The weight of the tactical vest felt foreign, but his resolve was steady. He thought of Lily, safe at his sister's house, and said a silent prayer that this operation would help make her world a little safer. As he walked toward the waiting SUV, he felt none of the fear that had haunted him for so long. Instead, there was only quiet determination and the certainty that he was finally doing exactly what he needed to do. The night air hung heavy and thick around the abandoned warehouse. Ethan crouched behind a stack of wooden pallets alongside Agent Marcus Hale, his heart pounding against his ribs. The moonless sky made the rural location feel especially isolated, with only scattered security lights casting weak yellow pools across the cracked pavement. "Remember," Hale whispered, checking his tactical gear. "Just listen for what we discussed. You're our ears out here." Ethan nodded, trying to steady his breathing. After years of working on engines, he could identify subtle mechanical variations that most people missed. Tonight, that skill might help catch whoever had threatened his daughter. 3 other agents positioned themselves around the warehouse perimeter, their dark uniforms melting into the shadows. The plan was simple but dangerous. Intercept the stolen technology during transport before it could disappear forever. Minutes crawled by like hours. Ethan's legs cramped from staying still, but he didn't dare move. A gentle breeze carried the smell of rust and old motor oil. The warehouse had once been a distribution center, now just another forgotten building along the highway. Around 2 a.m., the distinctive rumble of approaching vehicles broke the silence. Ethan closed his eyes, focusing entirely on the sound. 2? No. 3 separate engines. The first sounded normal, probably a scout car. The second had a particular growl that caught his attention. "That's it," he whispered urgently to Hale. "The second vehicle. They've modified the exhaust system to handle extra weight, but they did it wrong. The back pressure's all wrong. That whine isn't normal." Hale pressed his radio. "Target identified. Second vehicle and convoy. Stand by." The vehicles emerged from around the bend, a stopped-out pickup truck in front, followed by an unmarked box truck and another pickup bringing up the rear. Just as they approached the warehouse entrance, floodlights blazed to life. Agents swarmed from their hiding spots, weapons drawn. "Federal agents, stop your vehicles and exit with your hands up." The lead pickup screeched to a halt. The box truck lurched forward, trying to break through, but armored SUVs appeared from side streets, boxing it in. Ethan's heart raced as he watched the scene unfold from behind the pallets. The driver of the box truck threw open his door and ran, but didn't make it far before agents tackled him. Others pulled the remaining suspects from their vehicles. Hale kept Ethan safely back as the scene was secured. "We've got them," Hale announced after several tense minutes. "The tech is in the truck, right where you said it would be. Good work, Ethan." Relief flooded through Ethan's body, making his knees weak. He leaned against the pallets, watching as agents led away the handcuffed suspects. One of them he recognized from photos, the board member who had orchestrated everything. The sound of another vehicle approaching made everyone tense, but Hale relaxed when he saw the familiar black SUV. Grace stepped out, her face tight with concern. When she spotted Ethan, she rushed toward him. "Are you all right?" she asked, reaching for his hands. "They told me it was over, that you helped them catch everyone." "I'm fine," Ethan assured her. "Just did what needed doing." Grace's eyes welled with tears as she pulled him into a tight embrace. "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder. "You've saved everything, again, just like you did all those years ago." Ethan held her close, feeling the tension of the past weeks finally starting to fade. Around them, agents secured the scene and collected evidence, but in that moment, it all felt distant. As the adrenaline wore off, exhaustion settled deep in Ethan's bones. Grace noticed his fatigue and guided him to her SUV. They drove a short distance to a clearing where they could watch the sky beginning to lighten in the east. "I can't believe it's really over," Grace said softly, leaning against the hood of the vehicle. Ethan stood beside her, watching the first hints of pink and gold paint the horizon. The morning air was cool and clean, carrying the promise of a new day. Both of them were too tired to speak much, but the silence felt comfortable, almost peaceful. The sun crept slowly upward, burning away the last shadows of night. Ethan thought about Lily, about calling her soon to say she could come home. He thought about his shop, waiting for him to return. Most of all, he thought about how a single act of kindness had set all of this in motion, both years ago and on that rainy night when he'd stopped to help a stranger. Grace's shoulder brushed against his as they watched the sunrise together. Despite their exhaustion, there was a shared sense of relief, of burdens, finally, lifted. The dawn painted everything in soft, hopeful light, and for the first time in weeks, Ethan felt truly at peace. Sunlight filtered through the trees as Ethan's truck wound its way down the familiar country roads leading to his sister's house. Grace sat beside him in the passenger seat, her usual corporate polish softened by exhaustion and relief. The events of the night still felt surreal. The warehouse, the arrests, the final resolution of a threat that had turned their lives upside down. "Are you nervous?" Grace asked softly, noticing how Ethan's fingers drummed against the steering wheel. "A little," he admitted with a slight smile. "I've never had to tell my daughter that her dad helped stop a criminal before. You did more than that, Ethan. You helped protect a lot of people." They turned onto his sister's street, a quiet lane lined with modest homes and well-tended gardens. Ethan's truck rolled to a stop in front of a white craftsman-style house with bright flower boxes in the windows. Before he could even cut the engine, the screen door burst open. "Dad!" Lily's voice rang out across the front yard as she flew down the porch steps. Her long brown hair streamed behind her as she ran. Ethan barely had time to get out of the truck before Lily crashed into him, wrapping her arms around his waist in a fierce hug. He held her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I was so worried," Lily mumbled against his shirt. "When Aunt Sarah got the call this morning saying everything was okay, I couldn't believe it. I'm sorry I scared you, sweetheart." Ethan's voice was rough with emotion. "But everything's all right now. It's really over." Grace walked around the truck to join them, her eyes soft as she watched their reunion. Lily looked up and immediately released her father to give Grace an enthusiastic hug as well. "I'm so glad you're both okay," Lily said. "Aunt Sarah told me there was some kind of operation last night, but she didn't know the details." "Your father was amazing," Grace told her, keeping an arm around Lily's shoulders as they walked toward the house. "He helped the investigators catch someone who was trying to steal from my company and hurt people. His knowledge about engines and mechanical systems was crucial." Lily beamed up at her father. "Really? You helped catch bad guys?" Ethan ducked his head modestly. "I just noticed some things about the way they modified their vehicles. The real work was done by the investigators." "Don't let him downplay it," Grace said firmly. "Your father is a hero in my eyes, Lily, and not just for what he did last night. He's been a hero to me for much longer than he knows." They reached the porch, where Ethan's sister Sarah stood waiting. She was a shorter, female version of Ethan, with the same kind eyes and gentle presence. "Come on in, everyone," Sarah said warmly. "I've got lunch almost ready. You must be starving after the night you had." The inside of Sarah's house was cozy and welcoming, filled with family photos and comfortable furniture. As they settled around the kitchen table, Lily couldn't stop watching Grace with admiration. "I can't believe everything that's happened," Lily said. "When those black SUVs first showed up at our house, I was so scared. But now?" She smiled at Grace. "Now it feels like we gained family instead of losing anything." Grace reached across the table and squeezed Lily's hand. "You did gain family, sweetheart. I promise I'll always look out for you and your father." What started as a chance encounter in the rain has become one of the most important connections in my life. Sarah brought over a platter of sandwiches and a large bowl of fresh fruit salad. The simple meal felt perfect after the intensity of recent events. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, creating pools of warmth on the checked tablecloth. The quiet sounds of eating and casual conversation filled the room with a peaceful domesticity that felt like a blessing after so much tension. Ethan watched as Grace helped Lily serve herself some fruit salad, noting how natural their interaction had become. His daughter was smiling more than he'd seen in years, and the weight that had been crushing his chest since his wife's death felt lighter somehow. "This is nice," Lily said, looking around the table at all of them. "It feels like—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Like home," Grace finished softly. "It feels like home." Sarah began gathering empty plates, waving away offers of help. "You all just rest. You've earned it." As they sat in the warm kitchen, surrounded by the comfort of family, both old and new, Ethan felt profound gratitude wash over him. What had started as a simple act of kindness on a rainy night had led them here, to safety, to connection, to hope. The peaceful moment felt like a gift, one he would treasure for years to come. The morning sun cast long shadows through the dusty windows of Ethan's auto shop as he turned the key in the lock for the first time in weeks. The familiar scent of motor oil and metal greeted him as he pushed open the heavy door. Everything was exactly as he'd left it that day. Tools still arranged on the workbench, invoice papers scattered across his desk, the old coffee maker unplugged in the corner. Ethan ran his hand along the smooth surface of his main workbench, memories flooding back of countless hours spent here. The shop had been his anchor through the darkest times after losing his wife, the place where he could pour his grief into honest work. Now it felt different somehow, like a chapter ending and beginning all at once. Grace's heels clicked against the concrete floor as she stepped inside behind him. She traded her usual business attire for dark slacks and a simple blouse, as if sensing the need to bridge their two worlds. Her eyes took in every detail of the modest space with genuine interest. "It's a good shop," she said warmly. "You can feel the care that's gone into it." Ethan nodded, throat tight with emotion. "Been here 20 years now. Started with just me and a basic tool set." "And how many people have you helped in those 20 years?" Grace asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "How many stranded travelers, struggling families, people who couldn't afford repairs elsewhere?" He shrugged, uncomfortable with the implied praise. "Just tried to do right by folks when I could. That's exactly why I'm here today." Grace moved to stand beside him at the workbench. "I've been thinking about everything that's happened, not just these past weeks, but years ago when you helped a scared young woman you'd never met before." She paused, meeting his eyes. "Your shop isn't just a business, Ethan. It's been a lighthouse for people in need." Ethan shifted his weight, sensing something significant in her words. "What are you getting at?" Grace smiled. "I want to help. You transformed this place into something bigger, a community center of sorts, focused on auto repair but expanding beyond that. We could create training programs for veterans transitioning to civilian work, employment opportunities for single parents needing flexible schedules, free emergency repairs for families in crisis." Her eyes lit up as she continued. "The Marotech Foundation would provide funding and resources, but you would oversee everything, keeping the heart and soul of what makes this place special." Ethan stared at her, stunned. That's too much. I couldn't possibly." "You already do most of this informally," Grace interrupted gently. "I've talked to people in town. Everyone knows if they're truly desperate, Ethan Ward will find a way to help them get back on the road. This would just give you the proper support and structure to help even more people." He walked slowly around the shop, trying to process her words. His eyes fell on the wall of photos, customers posing with their repaired vehicles, thank you cards, newspaper clippings from local charity events, 20 years of connections and community captured in fading snapshots. It would still be your shop, Grace added softly, your vision. We'd just be helping you expand that vision to touch more lives. Ethan's hand traced the edge of an old photo, showing him with a group of high school students he'd taught basic car maintenance. He remembered their proud faces as they changed their first tire, checked their first oil level. Could really help some folks, couldn't it? More than you know. Grace stepped closer. Your kindness changed my entire life, Ethan. Imagine how many others could be impacted if we removed the financial constraints that sometimes hold you back from helping everyone you want to help. He turned to face her, seeing the earnest hope in her expression. This wasn't charity or pity. It was recognition of something valuable that already existed, something worth nurturing and growing. Would need to hire some good people, he said slowly. Maybe start small, build up proper. Grace's face brightened. Is that a yes? Ethan looked around the shop again, but this time he saw it through new eyes. He saw workspace for training sessions, lifts dedicated to emergency repairs, veterans finding purpose in passing on their skills to others. He saw his simple dream of helping others expanding into something he'd never dared imagine. Yes, he said quietly, emotion making his voice rough. Yes, I think it is. Grace touched his arm gently. Then let's get started. I brought some preliminary plans I'd like you to look at, but only if you're ready. Ethan nodded, moving toward the shop doorway. The morning sun had risen higher now, streaming through the windows and illuminating the space in golden light. He stood there, taking in the familiar sights, sounds, and smells of his beloved shop. But now, each detail seemed charged with new possibility, new purpose. Outside, he could hear construction vehicles pulling up, Grace's team arriving with the first set of plans and proposals. But for just a moment longer, Ethan remained in the doorway, letting himself fully feel the weight of this transition. Everything that had led him here, every late-night repair, every act of kindness, every hardship and triumph, had been preparing him for this next chapter. He watched as the first contractors began unloading their equipment, preparing to help transform his modest shop into something greater. Not erasing what it had been, but building upon its foundation of service and compassion. Sunlight streamed through the newly installed windows of Ethan's auto shop, illuminating fresh paint and gleaming equipment. The transformation over the past few days had been remarkable. Where old fluorescent lights once flickered, modern LED fixtures now brightened every corner. The concrete floor gleamed with a professional coating, and the waiting area welcomed visitors with comfortable chairs instead of the mismatched furniture from before. Ethan stood in the doorway of his office, now expanded and refreshed, watching workers install the final touches. His weathered hands were tucked into the pockets of clean work pants, his shoulders relaxed for the first time in years. Grace approached quietly, her heels clicking softly on the new floor. She'd traded her usual corporate attire for dark jeans and a simple blouse, looking perfectly at home in the rural setting. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her voice gentle. Ethan turned to her with a small smile. Still trying to believe it's real, to be honest. They walked together toward the back of the shop where Lily sat on a new workbench, swinging her legs and typing on her phone. She looked up and grinned at them both. "Dad, Mrs. Henderson just texted. She says half the town is planning to stop by today." Grace leaned against the workbench. "Is that why? You're nervous, Ethan?" "Maybe a little," he admitted. "Never been one for attention." A comfortable silence fell between them. Through the open bay doors, birds chirped in the Tennessee morning. Grace's expression grew thoughtful. "You know," she said softly, "after I lost my baby, I thought I'd never feel whole again. Every morning felt like climbing a mountain." Ethan nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Sarah's death was like that. Some days I could barely breathe." Lily reached out and squeezed her father's hand. Grace watched the gesture with warm appreciation. "But look at us now," Grace continued. "Here we are, building something new, something good. Because of you," Ethan said. Grace shook her head. "Because of who you are, Ethan, your kindness that night in the rain, it wasn't the first time you'd helped someone in need. It's who you've always been." The sound of cars pulling into the parking lot drew their attention. Through the windows, they could see several trucks and cars arriving, familiar faces from town emerging. Mrs. Henderson, the retired schoolteacher, was first through the door. Her eyes widened at the shop's transformation. "Oh my word, Ethan Ward! This place is beautiful!" More townspeople filtered in. The hardware store owner, farmers from neighboring properties, the local pastor. They gathered around Ethan, offering heartfelt thanks for his role in stopping the corporate conspiracy and congratulations on the shop's renovation. Grace moved easily among them, introducing herself not as a CEO, but simply as a friend. She listened intently to their stories about Ethan's past kindnesses, fixing cars for struggling families, teaching young people about auto repair, never turning away someone in need. "He helped my boy Jimmy learn the trade," Mr. Peterson, the hardware store owner, told Grace. "Now Jimmy's got his own shop 2 counties over. Fixed my tractor last spring," added Tom Wilson, a weather-worn farmer, "wouldn't take a force dime for it, even though I knew he was struggling himself." Ethan's ears reddened at the praise, but Grace noticed how he stood straighter, finally allowing himself to accept the community's gratitude. Lily beamed with pride beside him. As the afternoon wore on, more visitors came and went. Someone brought homemade cookies. Children played in the newly paved parking lot while their parents toured the facility. The atmosphere was celebratory, but comfortable, like a family gathering. Ethan found himself explaining the new training program to a group of veterans. His voice grew animated as he described how they would learn automotive skills while earning a living wage. Grace watched from across the room, noting how natural he was as a teacher. The shadows lengthened as afternoon faded toward evening. The crowd thinned until only a few visitors remained, chatting quietly in small groups. Lily had joined her friends by the vending machines, their laughter carrying across the shop. Grace approached Ethan, who was wiping down a workbench, more from habit than necessity. "Would you like to take a walk?" she asked. "It's a beautiful sunset." He nodded, setting aside the cloth. They stepped out into the golden evening light, their footsteps crunching on gravel as they walked toward the old oak tree at the edge of the property. "I saw something change in you today," Grace said softly. "Did you? You finally let yourself believe you deserve good things." Ethan was quiet for a moment, considering her words. "Maybe so. Being around you and seeing how you treat people, it reminds me of Sarah. She always said we're put here to help each other." She was right. Grace stopped walking, turning to face him. "And sometimes we need to let others help us too." The sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, casting a warm glow over them both. A gentle breeze carried the scent of summer flowers and fresh-cut grass. In the distance, they could hear Lily's laughter mixing with the sounds of crickets beginning their evening song. "I feel different," Ethan admitted. "Like I can breathe again. Like maybe life isn't finished surprising us," Grace suggested. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Recognition of shared pain, shared healing, and the possibility of something more. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink toward the horizon, neither needing to rush whatever was growing between them. Behind them, Lily watched from the shop doorway, a quiet smile on her face as she observed her father and Grace standing close in the fading light, their silhouettes peaceful against the painted sky. The morning sun cast long shadows across the newly paved parking lot of Ethan's transformed auto center. Rows of chairs faced a small podium near the building's entrance, where a red ribbon stretched between 2 posts. The fresh paint gleamed, and a new sign above the door read, "Ward Community Auto Center. Service, training, support." People streamed in from all directions, farmers in their Sunday best, veterans wearing service pins, families pushing strollers, and men in Marotech suits mingling easily with the townspeople. The atmosphere hummed with excitement and pride. Ethan stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, his clean work shirt pressed and tucked in. His weathered hands fidgeted slightly, uncomfortable being the center of attention. But when Lily appeared at his side, dressed in a pretty blue sundress, his nervousness eased. "Ready, Dad?" she asked, squeezing his arm. He nodded, managing a small smile. "As I'll ever be, sweetheart." Grace emerged from the office doorway, elegant in a simple gray dress that somehow bridged the gap between corporate CEO and small-town friend. She carried a pair of oversized scissors for the ribbon cutting, but first made her way to where Ethan and Lily stood. "The place looks perfect," she said softly. Her eyes held Ethan's for a moment, longer than necessary, warm with unspoken understanding. The ceremony began as people took their seats. Pastor Mike offered a brief blessing, and then Lily stepped up to the podium. Her voice trembled slightly at first, but grew stronger as she spoke. "Most of you have known my dad my whole life," she began. You've seen him work late nights fixing cars, never turning anyone away who needed help. You saw how he kept going after we lost Mom, always putting others first even when things were really hard. Ethan's eyes grew misty as his daughter continued. What you might not know is that my dad is the bravest person I've ever met. Not just because he helps stop bad people from doing bad things, but because he never stops believing in good, even when life is unfair. He taught me that true courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing what's right even when you're scared. Several people dabbed at their eyes. Mrs. Henderson sniffled audibly from the front row. This new center isn't just about fixing cars, Lily said. It's about everything my dad believes in, helping veterans find new purpose, teaching skills to people who need a fresh start, and making sure no one gets stranded on a dark road without hope. When Lily finished, the applause was thunderous. She hurried back to hug her father, who held her tightly, too moved for words. Grace took the podium next, her presence commanding yet approachable. Several months ago, my car broke down during a storm. A kind stranger stopped to help me, refusing payment and disappearing into the rain before I could properly thank him. She smiled at Ethan. That act of selfless kindness was nothing new for Ethan Ward. As we've heard, he's been quietly helping people his entire life. She paused, gathering her emotions. What Ethan didn't know was that he had helped me once before, years ago, when I was at my lowest point. His compassion quite literally saved my life, though he never knew my name. That's who Ethan Ward is, someone who helps without expecting recognition, who gives without counting the cost. The crowd sat transfixed as Grace continued. This center represents everything I believe in as CEO of Marotech: the power of community, the dignity of work, and the transformative impact of one person choosing kindness over indifference. But more than that, it represents the heart of a man who has taught me more about courage and integrity than any business school ever could. When Grace finished speaking, she joined Ethan and Lily at the ribbon. Cameras flashed as the oversized scissors snipped through the red ribbon, and cheers erupted from the crowd. The doors opened, revealing the gleaming new facility inside. People streamed through the center, admiring the modern equipment, the classroom space for training programs, and the comfortable waiting area. Veterans gathered around the employment office, while young people eagerly examined the apprenticeship postings. The whole place hummed with possibility. Throughout the day, well-wishers approached Ethan to shake his hand or share a memory. He accepted their congratulations with characteristic humility, always redirecting praise to his daughter, to Grace, to the community itself. As afternoon faded into evening, the crowd thinned. The caterers packed up their tables, and the last few visitors headed home. Finally, only Ethan, Grace, and Lily remained. They carried chairs outside, settling in to watch the stars emerge. The night was warm and clear, crickets chirping in the distance. Lily sat between them, her head resting on her father's shoulder. "I keep thinking about that night in the rain," Ethan said quietly. "How something so simple could lead to all this." Grace smiled in the darkness. "Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness have the biggest ripples." "I don't feel small anymore," Lily murmured. "Our life, I mean. It used to feel like we were just barely hanging on. But now we have purpose." Ethan finished. And each other. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars brighten against the deepening night sky. The new sign cast a soft glow over them, a beacon of hope in the darkness. From somewhere down the road, a whippoorwill called into the night, its song full of promise. Ethan looked at his daughter, then at Grace, feeling the simple rightness of this moment. All the struggles and fears that had weighed him down for so long seemed to lift away, replaced by a quiet certainty that everything was exactly as it should be. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Ward, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.